Okay, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. It's the day after the 2025 budget has been passed. And as you know by now, we'll talk about it a bit. Our guest is going to be Philip Agbese, Deputy Spokesperson of the House of Representatives. By now, of course, you know that we're talking about 54.99 trillion naira. And the breakdown, chunky segments, statutory transfers, 3.6 trillion, recurring, expenditure of 13.64 trillion, capital expenditure, 23.96 trillion, debt servicing, 14.32 trillion. Deficit to GDP ratio is said to be 1.52%.
And tuberculosis in Africa.
Price was increased by 700 billion to cater for the following. 1. The 270 billion differentials between the details of the budget and the bill. 2. The provision of $200 million, which is equivalent of 300 billion for procurement of vaccine and drugs. And 3. Some agents of the government that were provided funds to take care of their critical needs.
The Senate dissolved into the Committee of Supply, where the report was subjected to a clause-by-clause consideration and was approved.
1,624,250 naira only is for contribution to Development Fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st day of December. This bill is read a third time and passed.
The committee also recommended that the executive presents future budgets to the National Assembly not later than 3 months to the next financial year in order to return the country to the January to December budget cycle. TVC News, Abuja.
Okay, thank you very much to Tijesu Adeoye there. And good morning to you, Honorable Philip Agbese, Deputy Spokesperson in the House of Representatives. Good to see you again.
It's a pleasure, Uncle Yori.
My pleasure, sir. Okay, so the important work has been done. I was just, summarizing stuff that this is almost 100% increase over the 2024 budget, which was 27.5 trillion naira. It's the largest annual jump in recent years. We were just learning, how that came about, but it seems that you were persuaded that indeed it was the right thing to do, especially as the president had asked for an upward revision from his initial budget of 49.7 trillion naira.
Yes, thank you very much, Uncle Yori, and good morning to Nigerians. First and foremost, the 2025 appropriation bill that was sent to the National Assembly by His Excellency Mr. President came not just at the right time, but it came full of promises and hope, to revigorate and re-energize key sectors in the country. When we receive the bill as a parliament, of course, it is our duty to scrutinize and ensure that we carry out a thorough investigation into what is presented to us, engage our independent consultants to equally look at it. We got in experts and we all sat down together as a parliament to consider the details one after the other, and then thereafter we invited the MDAs to come forward to justify the proposal. And at the end of the day, Parliament was in.
To 1973, the young Alheri was enrolled into primary school at a very young age. He attended the Pella 1 primary school in Pella and Bangshika in 1968 and 1974. He proceeded to the Hong Secondary School for his secondary education, where he distinguished himself and graduated with a Division 1 distinction in both mock examination and WAEC. His Royal Highness Baris Alheri Bulus Nyako proceeded to the prestigious Ahmadu Bello University Zaria to study law between 1979 to 1983. He graduated on top of his class with a second-class upper division and proceeded to the Nigerian Law School in Lagos and was called to bar in 1984. Upon the completion of his National Youth Service in July 1985, His Royal Majesty was employed as a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Maiduguri. In 1985, His Royal Highness proceeded to University of Lagos in 1986 for a master's degree in law. Propelled
with the proposal as it is.
Okay, thank you for that overview. But as you know, experts have immediately they've been scrutinizing it, and experts, in commending, just as you have done, the government for the presentation, has also immediately expressed concern over how it is to be funded. Of course, some extra revenue is expected from some quarters, but did you pay attention to that as well, or do you see differently from the experts who are saying it's fine, but we are a bit concerned, that is the experts, as to how this will actually be funded?
Yes, before the budget came, we had what we call the midterm framework, which was carried out by the House Committee on Finance and the Senate Committee on Finance, and the MTEF, equally gave a guide. The revenue-generating institutions were invited, they made their presentations. We equally looked at that, and for this government, for this administration, they've demonstrated clearly that they are interested in curbing leakages in crude oil production and oil theft. We have also seen that revenue generation, not necessarily because there are increase, in taxes being paid by Nigerians, but because the government has been able to block some loopholes and equally engineering laudable reforms in the economy to ensure that our funds are properly accounted for. So if they continue in that light, if Mr. President is able to sustain that and all the revenue leakages are blocked and the money, is pulled together into the central purse, we strongly believe as a parliament that the government will be able to fund the budget. And when you are talking about budgetary provisions and figures, we equally look at the issue of personnel. These are issues that are static. It is not the duty of the parliament to alter it because issues in that area will always be taken care of. But again, if you look at the capital side of the budget, at the moment, the country is desirous of investing, in capital projects, and we have seen infrastructure development spreading across the country, which shows that the government is spending its money in the right direction. So, as a parliament, it is our duty, to follow the expenditure, to follow it and ensure that every single penny is being properly accounted for. And it is for that purpose that the parliament has various standing committees. In the House of Representatives, we have a couple of standing committees that are directly saddled with the responsibility of following government projects to ensure that budgetary allocations are dutifully applied to those areas. So give or take, we believe, strongly that if we all work together as a parliament, we collaborate with the executive and we partner together, we will not only see to the end of the budget, but we will also be able to, carry out massive development across the country. You also, if you notice from the budget too, you must have seen the provision of 150 billion naira for the North Central Development Commission, so also for the Southwest Development Commission. In addition to what the state government are doing across the country, Mr. President has signed the bill for the development of the various regions, And we have equally seen budgetary provisions for those things. If you look at the development in the Northeast after the Boko Haram insurgency, and when the Northeast Development Commission came on board and what it has been able to achieve, you also agree with me that these Development Commission bills that have been signed by Mr. President and the necessary budgetary provisions that have been made would also go a long way, in helping to develop the country across board. And if you look at the budgetary provision for education, this government is taking education very seriously. We came on board as a parliament. We introduced the student loan scheme bill. It was passed. And then Mr. President, as a listening president, quickly assented to that. So these are priority areas. And if you look at the recent provision that was added to the budget, the 500 billion naira for building of infrastructure, housing, and barracks, accommodation, and all of that for members of the armed forces and their families. You also see that, yes, government is doing all that it has to do to ensure that we tackle the issue of insecurity head-on by, spurring the members of the armed forces to do more. So these are some of the critical issues as a parliament we looked at before, arriving at the collective decision to pass the budget in both the Senate and the People's House of Representatives.
Just as you mentioned, you spoke about education there. You touched on education, and that's as well, because I was going to ask about that. But also I was going to say food, agriculture on one side, although agriculture is, more than food in some aspects, and then health. How about those two subheadings?
Yes, let me take agriculture first. The Honorable Minister of Agriculture, distinguished Senator Carey, throughout the entire budget presentation, he was with us in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. He accompanied all the agencies, to ensure that, proper questions were asked and the agencies gave those questions. Beyond those questions that were asked and answered, looking back at the performance of the 2024 budget in terms of agriculture, the agricultural institutions and agencies across the country, have been able to add value, to our local farmers. And that we are seeing, in terms of rice production, cassava production across the country. And for us as a parliament, we're also excited when the president, sent in, when he sent in not supplementary but additional request, for the bill to be amended to accommodate 500 billion naira for the Bank of Agric. Now, the Bank of Agric plays a very important role as a creation of parliament, to support our farmers across the country. And in doing that, as a country, in less than no time, we are going to attain, food sufficiency. We have even seen examples where some states, even though some people have argued that Niger State under Bago has taken the food basket away from Benue, aside Niger State and the effort that the governor is putting in place in Niger State to ensure that there is food for all, KB has done quite a lot in that regard. The previous administration, led by His Excellency Atiku Bagudu, was able to partner with Lagos State, and we saw that agricultural revolution in terms of rice production and other staple foods from KB State. So we are believing, that the Bank of Agriculture, will deploy the 500 billion naira that has been approved by Parliament, to ensure that we have this widespread of agricultural activities across the country. And to that end, we salute, Mr. President, for that, for his wisdom, his thoughtfulness, and the usefulness of purpose to see that area. On the issue of health, we don't need to beat around the bush. We have seen clearly that Mr. President is equal to the task by the proactive, deployment, of legislative instruments to reach the Parliament even before the passage of the budget, to ensure that the recent policy directive in the United States of America does not affect our citizens adversely. And in doing that, we, as a parliament, as a people's house, we are equally spurred to support him. And that was why the additional request, to make provision for the health sector came, we tackled it, and we all agreed as a parliament, even though we have various political parties, but on national issues and development, we are always united as one family, to do the needful. That we have done, and before that also came to the parliament, we equally looked at the spread, of activities across the health sector, the proposal brought in by the executive, and what they intend to do. Like I mentioned earlier, and I want to give kudos to His Excellency Mr. President, because when he presented the budget to both chambers of the National Assembly, he did mention categorically clear that all heads of extra-ministerial departments should be not just be invited, that they should make themselves available, and anyone who fails to make him or herself available before the parliament will be sanctioned. And I think the heads of the agencies actually adhered to that. We recorded about 100% of their presence. Critical questions were asked. We looked at the performance of the 2024 budget. In some instances, parliamentarians even went as far as the 2023 budget, which His Excellency Mr. President inherited. We looked at all those issues because you must know where you are coming from to know where you are going to. And as it stands today, I can assure you, as an insider in the parliament, that we are cocksure that the executive is going to perform with the approval that we have given.
And when the president had actually written to the National Assembly seeking an increase, his letter had explained that the increment was necessary due to additional revenue from Federal Inland Revenue Service, Nigeria Customs, and other revenue generating agencies. So when you look at the breakdown, we saw that the Inland Revenue Service would be contributing 1.4 trillion, then 1.2 trillion coming from customs and other agencies, other government-owned enterprises, netting us 1.8 trillion naira. When you look at, could you just comment on those figures and the input, since Mr. President had cited them as, look, because of this, we have to capture it in the budget?
Yes, we must give it to the executive, particularly the leader of that arm, His Excellency Mr. President, for the honesty, for the transparency and probity that he demonstrated in, in opening up, these revenue sources, which of course was not envisaged when the budget was being prepared. One thing that citizens have always demanded from government is accountability. And that is one area I think a couple of Nigerians are happy, not because things are working the way they want, but to a large extent the government has been able to, make presentations, as to satisfy queries and questions that are asked by Nigerians on critical national issues. In doing that, Mr. President equally sent it to the parliament, and as a people's parliament, we also looked at it from the genuineness of purpose expressed by His Excellency Mr. President, that yes, this is additional money, we're expecting. We feel it will be good for us to redirect how the money will be spent. So we commend Mr. President in that aspect, and as a parliament, we are going to ensure, that those areas that have been articulated by Mr. President, because the letter sent to the Parliament by Mr. President was self-explanatory. He took his time to explain these critical areas and the need, for funds to be deployed to those areas. We commend him, and as a Parliament, we welcome that idea. That is why we have passed that additional request. For us, like His Excellency the Right Honorable Speaker Tajuddin Abbas has mentioned, it goes beyond passing the budget. As parliamentarians, we have a duty to support the executive by helping, to ensure that the various agencies deploy this money judiciously. We are going to follow the money we're going to follow them, to ensure that they are not just well spent, but they are applied to those critical development needs of the country that we as a parliament who have also accepted and passed the budget in that direction. I think so far for looking at the 2024 Appropriation Act, the executive has been judicious in terms of implementation. I want to commend the other key actors, like some of the policies that were introduced by the Accountant General of the Federation to ensure that funds are not, released 100% to contractors, but in certain staggered installments to ensure that, releases of funds are based on performance. And if they continue in that direction, it means that all the projects captured in the budget will only have been fully paid for after the work has been carried out. That, again, will curb corruption. And then Mr. President's fight against corruption is also another area, for us as a parliament that we are pleased with, because that has equally helped, to block leakages and loopholes in the expenditure of government. And if we continue like that, we sustain that momentum as a parliament, and the executive equally, continues in the direction which it is going. I'm sure Nigerians will be happy at the end of the day.
How about the security sector? As you know, Mr. President has made some, it was in the news very, very recently, how the president had given marching orders to the military to, make a substantial and appreciable dent on criminality all over the country by the end of the year. Of course, there are cost implications because all these, the army, all these people, they have to be equipped. These things, they cost a pretty penny, as they say. What does the budget, how does the budget relate to that and shoring up the capability, for instance, of the police?
Yes, in time past, the problem with some of these critical national institutions are not necessarily for lack of budgetary provision or lack of funds. It has always been a question of the will, to address the issues. And when Mr. President came on board, he did well by appointing very capable hands, to head these institutions. Like you are aware, some of these institutions require that the National Assembly must give a nod before individuals are considered, to be fit and proper to occupy those offices. And in doing this, particularly for the security sector, it requires, the input of both chambers of the National Assembly. Today, the heads of these agencies, we have confidence in their ability to tackle these issues. And when they appeared before the parliament, we asked critical questions as to their needs. And that is why one could see that even after the initial budget presentation, Mr. President still deemed it necessary again to make additional provision for members of the armed forces. So in terms of budgetary provision and what we have today, we have this understanding, with the heads of these various agencies that with the approval of this sum of money, they will be able to attain a certain milestone, to drastically reduce the issue of insurgency and insecurity across the country. It is an ongoing thing. We are going to be around to look at them, review them from time to time. You will also see that the People's Parliament under the leadership of His Excellency Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas introduced what we call the sectoral debate. As soon as the budget is passed into law and implementation begins, we'll begin to invite the heads of agencies, to the parliament for sectoral debate. It is during the sectoral debate that we are able to look at, their vision and look at how well they have been able to implement the budget, their direction, and areas that parliament, could come in to further support them, or areas that they feel that we have to do something about the law, to enhance their productivity. So basically, when you put all this together, you see that the parliament is not only interested in the protection of the life and properties of our citizens, but again, to help that our farmers, are able to go back to their farms. They need, because if you provide incentive for the farmers and they are not able to farm, then you've not done much. So basically, what we have done as a parliament is to ensure even distribution, not just to any particular sector, but those sectors that we in our legislative agenda have captured as very, very critical and necessary to the survival of our nation. And these areas, like I mentioned earlier, education, health, security, agriculture, the economy, and the issue of youth restiveness and industrialization. And that was why when His Excellency Mr. President brought the additional requirement and said he intends to deploy that money into building small-scale industries across the country, of course, as a parliament, we are excited and want to see that being done in practical reality in the interest of the people of our country.
Okay. Honorable Agbese, just stay with us, please. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we'll include calls from home if there are any. Stay with us, please.
You're watching Beyond 100 Days with Nifemi Oguntoye. President Tinubu, since he assumed office,
we are on our way to progress.
6 out of the 8 APC federal lawmakers.
I have a movement structure that's going to take back our party in Enugu State. Because this one I'm seeing is tales by moonlight. It's not working.
So I'm wondering what you think or who you think can stop him now.
He doesn't own the party.
One of the causes of inflation is because people cannot go to the farm.
The government still needs to do more so that people can eat.
I believe what we're clamoring for is more responsible use of social media. Not that people just go in there and think that they can say anything to anybody.
Tinubu is not one.
Okay, welcome back, and our guest is Honorable Philip Agbese, Deputy Spokesperson of the House of Representatives. He's doing an overview of the processes that led to the passing of this budget, which is 54.99 trillion. In fact, when we're talking trillions, we need to spell out the figures before the dot. Ordinarily, one might have rounded up and said that 55 trillion, but we're talking here in trillions, not millions anymore, not billions anymore. Now we're talking trillions, so 54.99 trillion. And that's coming from the 2024 budget, coming up from the 2024 budget of 27.5 trillion. Now, Honorable Agbese, when analysts have immediately made the calculations and decided, found that the deficit to GDP ratio is set at about 1.52%, does that talk about that? What's the significance of that deficit to GDP ratio of 1.52%?
Yes, you see, in the parliament we have various categories of committees. We have the technical committees, the professional committees, and the administrative committees. Now, in looking at the budget, the three categories of committees will look at this issue. And, in their wisdom, the technical committee, of course, the House Committee on Appropriation is a technical committee. The Committee on Finance is a professional committee. And, of course, you have the administrative committees. So in looking at this budgetary allocation, these various committees of the parliament have looked at them, with the eyes of that expertise that is required, to accept that, yes, this document is going to work. The executive on its own too did its own homework, before bringing forward the budget. And for us as a parliament, we are very, very optimistic, that it is a budget that is going to address the overall well-being of the citizens of this great nation. Every figure that has been stated in that budget is geared towards, solving one problem or the other, making Nigeria a better place. So in the past, you see, I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I will continue to say that these figures have never been the issue. The issue has always been the implementation of the document, to give life to the bill as passed by the Parliament and as attended to by Mr. President. And now, as a Parliament, we are holding the executive to account, for every single money that the Parliament has agreed to. So, strongly, the implication of this budget is that we in the Parliament, we believe that we are moving towards the era of prosperity, generally, for everyone.
Yeah, especially when you look at the capital expenditure proposal of 23.96 trillion, right next to recurring, non-debt recurring expenditure of 13.64. So 23.96 capital, 13.64. It's a comfortable ratio, would you say?
Yes. You see, we looked at the ratio. It is, yes, there's an improvement. This is the first time we're going to have this massive budgetary provision for capital projects. And, when you invest in capital projects, you invest into the future of the country. For instance, when you build infrastructure, you build for the future of that country. All of us, we have seen what Minister Nyesom Wike, is doing in the FCT here. Across, we have even seen, if not until Nyesom Wike came aboard, some of us didn't know that the roads do expire. We have seen, some of these roads that faded out, being removed and new roads are being done. These are investments, considered by the Parliament and by the executive to be things that will stay, for another 30 to 40 years. So I think this huge capital expenditure ratio that Mr. President has proposed and has been approved by the Parliament, is a step in the right direction. That is the wisdom of the Parliament. It is because Parliament sees it to be good that is why Parliament has approved both chambers, and we are the people's representatives. We do not just make approval because of our technical knowledge or our expertise and experience in the various sectors where we are coming from, but also because of our consultation with our constituents. Across the country today, we have health facilities that have been dilapidated without government doing anything about them. And we have now seen a budget proposal by Mr. President where these health facilities, will be revamped. We have seen a budgetary provision providing for rail transportation and new network, from Lagos to Maiduguri, covering the entire country. And we have equally seen a new budgetary provision that is going to tackle, critical issues like investing in mining, in oil, solid mineral exploration. So these things put together, sum up our reason, as a Parliament, to accept that document and to give life to it by making it. By passing it. So it is now left for Mr. President, who in his own wisdom, had made this proposal, looked at it with members of his team and said, this is how I intend to transform the nation. And Parliament has given express approval in line with constitutional provisions to say, yes, we believe in this vision. So what I would like to say at this point is to implore citizens to be cooperative, to support this document that has been endorsed by their representatives, and for all of us to work hand in hand to ensure, the other time we mentioned the issue of insecurity. Insecurity cannot just be tackled by the executive alone. The Parliament must collaborate through bills, that will enhance, the fighting capacity of our troops. We must also, as a Parliament, look at other areas, that are strategically geared towards providing security. And that's why, in the wisdom of His Excellency, the Right Honourable Speaker, we engage the heads of the various security agencies, in a sectorial debate to look at the issues before them. We also made some contributions. And they are looking at our contributions. Sometimes we go hard, we summon them to appear, and when they appear, we ask those questions. Because every day when, a Nigerian citizen is killed somewhere, a member of the Parliament is not happy about that. And because Mr. President has given a marching order to the security agencies to say, guys, come on, by the end of December 2025, I want to see that we have been able to address, 70% of these security issues. So we too, as a parliament, have our role to play. We relate directly with our constituents on a daily basis, and we get their feedback, process them, pass to the executive, either through bills, through motions, or even during our oversight activities, to ensure that, citizens are not just happy, but the executive too is also, on its to deliver. So, back to your question, I think every nation will be happy to see the kind of infrastructural development that we're witnessing in Abuja today spread across Lagos, spread across Borno, and every part of the country. And again, I'll point it out that is the essence, of the development commissions that Mr. President, again in his wisdom, has assented to, to ensure that we have even distribution of major capital projects like roads, schools, health centers, and what have you, across the country, to cater for the needs of our people and to boost their economy.
You have spoken, should I say, glowingly of the preparation of the executive before, sending the proposals to you. You commended them. In fact, some commentators have also commended, subject to the whole matter about how these will be funded, that I said some experts are worried about in today's press. And I'm sure in the following week or so, we'll have ample time to talk about that. But you also, you said that, look, by and large, you are impressed with the preparation, the work that the executive put into it. So I was going to ask, what are those minimal amendments? I don't know if there were additions or subtractions, but you did indicate that, there were some amendments. But by and large, you are pleased with the presentation of the executive, and that was why you were able to, quite frankly, easily approve. What were those amendments that you found you could make?
Yes, we made what I would term as substantial amendments, because the figures that we are talking about are not anything easy to come by. A good example is the amendment, which of course was part of Mr. President's proposal, to look at, like I mentioned earlier, reforms in other parts of the world. You will agree with me that just recently a new president was sworn in another part of the world, and that country happens to be a partner of our country. They'll be quite supportive in some areas, which the new administration in that country no longer feels necessary, to continue in that direction. And Mr. President, in his proactive approach, whispered to the parliament, to say this is what is happening in that part of the country. What do we do? And in our own wisdom, we made provision for additional support for Mr. President in that regards. The issue of election and electoral reforms in the country are also very important issues. We have addressed that because the budget proposal brought before the Parliament by the Independent National Electoral Commission, Parliament considered it not to be sufficient, and we tickled with that. And again, the North Central Development Commission, the Northwest Development Commission, some of these issues were not envisaged when the original document was passed to the National Assembly. And because Mr. President has, has agreed to our wisdom in those bills, he has equally, accepted for us to make amendments, by making provisions for these development agencies that are coming up. I'm equally aware, I may not be able to give you the exact figure, but I know again that at the course of parliamentary debate, we raise issues with the National Identity Management Commission, even so many of the agencies, they came in to say that they really, really wish, more was done. We looked at this issue, we scrutinized them, and in some instances, we touched something, we added. In some instances, we reduced. It is when the budget is signed and we have all these figures collated, and made as a public instrument that Nigerians can now begin to look at those issues. But again, I think what is important, which is the most important issue, like I will say all the time, is the implementation of this budget.
Mm-hmm.
Nigerians have raised the issue of how this budget is going to be funded. You know, we are interested. And you know that the parliament has, you know, the constitutional power to make approvals in terms of how government can service its obligations, where they intend to borrow. Nevertheless, we are focused on our revenue-generating agencies. And that is why you have the new tax reform bills, where we are looking at these monies were in the country before. Where did they go to? What did we use them for? And Mr. President has said, we are moving to an era where we'll put these funds together and apply them, you know, as a country for every Nigerian to know. Because, for instance, spending monies that are not appropriated by Parliament is actually a crime everywhere in the world. These things have been happening in the country, if not until Mr. President came on board. And if you look at this issue of revenue-generating agencies, generating funds, and utilizing the same funds at the same time, I give a good example. I wouldn't want to be specific on any agency, but I know a particular one that came to the National Assembly and said, we generated 1.2 trillion. And when we asked them, so how did you spend the money? And they said, we spent about 800 million, sorry, 1.2 billion. We spent 800 million running the agency. And Nigerians didn't know before now, they were clapping for them. These are some of the things we have proposed to Mr. President, and we are trying to use the tax reform to put a halt to them. You cannot generate money and spend the money, just like Mr. President has done with this extra budget revenue from customs and federal revenue service. When you generate the money, bring it to the central post. Let Mr. President, as the head of the executive, give a direction as to how this money will be spent. So we believe that beyond 2025, we are now going to run a country where these agencies of government who generate revenue are no longer allowed to spend the money. Nigerians will not be able to see the money, you know, before they will be deployed into critical sectors. So if we stop some of these issues, you will now see that you begin to look in that lens that Mr. President is seeing from, that yes, truly, he can do what he has said he's going to do through the budget. And if we also continue, you know, because Nigerians have said the 10th National Assembly is on track because they've seen some of the things that we're doing, sectoral debate, the way we carry out our oversight functions, and the kind of bills and motions that are presented on the floor of both chambers. You will now realize that, the parliament is also working. So if the parliament and the executive are working, then nothing stops the country from achieving its set objectives and aims as a nation. So these are some of the critical issues that we as parliamentarians are very much interested in. And I believe too that our constituents are excited about these issues as well.
I would imagine so. And it's important, but that you said earlier that we are going to be around, talking about your good honorable selves and distinguished senators. We are going to be around in terms of the oversight. We're going to be watching. We are participating. It's our Commonwealth. And as you've rightly said, you guys in there are representing every last citizen of the Federal Republic. So that's heartwarming to know that this humongous budget, that is what, about 100% over the 2024 budget, it has much promise in it. It's the largest annual jump in recent years, but reassuringly, you say we are going to be around, as it were, almost like every step of the way. We're partners in this. Hello, Honorable?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. No, I was just commenting that it's reassuring that you say that you are going to be there. You had said earlier that honorable parliamentarians are going to be around.
Yes.
Are going to be around to be watching, doing oversight on all of these things.
Yes. That basically is a reflection of the kind of leadership that we have in the parliament today. And I'll use our chamber, the Green Chamber, as a good example. The commitment of His Excellency, the Right Honorable Speaker, to the welfare of the citizens of this great nation cannot be overemphasized. He a people's person, you know, he believes in the masses of our country, and he sees Parliament as an instrument, you know, to provide good governance for the overall well-being of citizens of this great nation. So looking through the lens of the Right Honorable Speaker and immersing ourselves in that genuine spirit of patriotism as people who are working and who want to work for the better of their country, I think Nigerians have no reason, to be apprehensive. We are going to live up to expectations by God's grace. In the last 1 year and few months that we have been in office, Nigerians have actually seen, clearly that this is indeed the People's Parliament. We'll continue to evolve from one area of good governance to another with our innovations in the Parliament to ensure that, yes, the executive is held to account for all the monies that we have provided and even future resources that will come into the country. We wish them well. We are available to support them. We equally appreciate the support and cooperation of our citizens throughout this budget period. Because it hasn't been easy. One can only imagine, the kind of work that was carried out by Right Honorable Kabiru Bichi and his counterpart in the Senate. Like you mentioned, a very homogeneous budget for the Parliament, to be able to scrutinize this document page by page and look at every figure, ask necessary questions, investigate some in the past and come up with this resolution. I think in a very humble manner that the Parliament, is on track. We have tried. We'll continue to do more than this because that's exactly why we have been paid to be in the Parliament by Nigerians.
We're going to have to leave it there.
We'll continue to report back to them as our bosses.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Honorable Philip Agbese, Deputy Spokesman in the House of Representatives, for coming on our program to, throw some insight into the processes that led to the, passing of this particular budget. Thank you very much once again for coming on our program.
It's a pleasure, Uncle Yori.
Okay, sir. So we're going to have to leave it there. Do please join us on Monday for a fresh edition of the program. I'm Yori Folani. Do have a great weekend. Bye-bye for now.